But yeah, Fariah is a product designer. She's based in Queens, who also graduated from Pratt through the same program, the Information Experience Design, and now works at Dow Jones. She creates design solutions for leading financial news outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Barron, and Market Watch. Her work emphasizes accessibility and user-centered approach, ensuring that each design is both effective and inclusive. She's guided by the belief that if you can design one thing, you can design everything. That's a quote by Massimo Vigelli. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But yeah, with that being said, Freya, I'll hand it over to you. You can screen share and get us started. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So let me share my screen. Also, thank you so much for the introduction. Um, yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Faria. Um, and like Nidhi mentioned, I graduated from Pratt Institute from the same program as you guys, the IXD program. And I'm currently a product designer at Dow Jones. So that's a little bit of my background right here. I was born and raised in Pakistan, and I lived in Seattle for 7 years. And that's where I attended University of Washington, got my bachelor's in biochemistry. I wanted to be a doctor or something like that, but then I changed my mind, and then I was like doing research in biochem. I didn't really like it that much, so I was like looking into like different like career options, career paths. I worked at like a public library for a little bit. I did freelance photography, and then I was like, that's when I discovered design and specifically product design. So I looked into it a little bit, did like a Google certificate program just to see what it's about. I really liked it, so that's when I enrolled in the IXD program at Pratt Institute. And right now, I'm working as a product designer at Dow Jones. Um, And as for like what my career looks like from like since Pratt, like since graduating from Pratt, well, while I was at Pratt, I interned at a small, like very small design agency. It was based in London, and this was in 2021. So it was still like COVID times. Everything was online, everything was remote. And honestly, this internship was not my first choice, but I was like, okay, I just need something at this point because of COVID, everything was just like such a mess at that time. But the one thing that I was looking forward to was like learning more visual design skills. Because of my background in biochem or like coming from like such a STEM major, I didn't really have much experience with graphic design or visual design. So I was hoping that by interning at this like design agency that primarily focused on like print design and like book design, brochure design. I was like, okay, I can pick up some visual design skills. Um, and then after that, the summer, I guess I would have liked to intern somewhere, but that was the summer I had to move to New York City. So the first half of my degree was online. I was still in Seattle because of, like I mentioned, it was still COVID times. And so that summer of 2021, when ideally I would have like liked to do like maybe a second internship or something, I had to move to New York City, and it was kind of like a big move, like moving coast to coast. So I didn't really have time. Also, honestly, I think I got lazy. I didn't really try that much. So um, fast forward in my last semester at Pratt, I got the opportunity to interview, and I got a full-time job while I was still in my last semester at Pratt. And that was at the at IPG Health. It's a pretty big like umbrella of like design agencies and advertising agencies. And the role that they offered was a UX architect. And the reason it worked out was uh, a former like a Pratt alum reached out, even though he graduated like ages ago, like 10, 15 years ago. Uh, he was like, I guess he was a design director at that time, and he was going through his like LinkedIn network to see if anyone fits the role. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn that they have a role open at IPG Health, and like I'm open to apply for it, and he will forward my resume directly to the hiring manager. I was a little unsure about it because I was still full time, uh, doing my full time degree, like at Pratt, so I wasn't sure how my class schedule and just like working like full time would work together. But it worked out. I like communicated with them that I'm still a student and I'm going to it's going to take me a few months to graduate. So anyway, I started working full time before I graduated, which I graduated in May of that year. Um, but which kind of worked out, but the downside was that I didn't really have like a break between my degree and then starting a full-time job. I transitioned directly into it. So because of that, next year, by August next year, I was feeling really burnt out. Like I was just like, okay, like I've been first it was grad school, and now I've been working full time, so I needed a little bit of a like a some time away. So August, I decided to take that time off, and again, things kind of lined up. For me in a way that I was able to start the my next role as a UX architect at Dow Jones. And then a little bit about the role itself, UX, because both my first and my second role that I'm currently in, they both started as UX architect. And basically what that is like you do like everything in the UX process, the design process, except the final, like the visual, like high fidelity mockups. So you craft the like user experience, the user flows, information architecture, everything. And then in the end, you have a visual designer who comes in and then applies the branding and everything. And initially, I was really excited about this role because, like I mentioned, I was not really confident in my visual design skills. Um, but over the time that I was working as a UX architect. I realized that, well, two things: that it's a very niche role. Not a lot of organizations offer this role, and if you go like look it up on LinkedIn or any other like job sites, not a lot of UX architect roles show up. So like there was not much market for it. And also like I realized that since I've not been using my visual design skills, they were kind of getting rusty. So I was getting a little like anxious. I was like, okay, maybe I should like transition into a role where I have, like better career opportunities. But then fortunately, my company, Dow Jones, they did a restructuring of the entire design team, and they ended up merging the visual design roles with the UX architect roles. So now they're all just product designers. Now I just own the full like uh, process, the design process from like strategy all the way to like handoff and working with engineers. So it involves like visual design skills as well. So it worked out. But yeah, I've been working at Dow Jones since October of 2023. This was just like the side about my very brief career up till now. Honestly, it's not been that long. I feel like I'm still pretty new here in the field, but yeah, I'm like happy to share like any tips that I've like learned so far. Um, Anyway, so moving on to what is it like to be like to work as a product designer or just like as a designer. Um, I think it's very different from what we kind of like learn in school, in grad school. It's actually very different. Um, it's like one thing to like learn the design like principles and like the skills and the theory, but a lot of like what actually entails like working as a product designer is like something that you do when you actually start working with the larger teams. um, so most of my honestly my job is just meetings all day every day. It's like check-ins, stand-ups, like reviews, or just like scope meetings where you just meet up with people to try to understand the scope of the projects. And it's a daily struggle, honestly. So the actual design part, like where you're in Figma and designing stuff, is 25% or less. It doesn't actually take up most of my time. Most of my calendar time is booked just for meetings, and that involves like if I'm collaborating with another designer, like having work sessions with that designer or meeting with that designer to understand what to plan, or with people from other teams. So that involves like stakeholders, and just people that I might be collaborating with. And this is just like some of those teams that I usually work with. So a lot of my time is spent working with research team, the engineers. I think the engineers are probably one of the teams that I work the most with, along with product managers. So product managers are the people who will tell us like who usually bring like projects to us about what we need to do, like what needs to be revised, redesigned, any new product if we're launching. They're like the product owners, and they'll like help us like kind of like figure out the scope. In my case, another big team that I work with is the editorial team. So, for example, if the editors of the Wall Street Journal, for example, recently they wanted to like TikTokify the Wall Street Journal, like they wanted to introduce that vertical video format and make sure people can scroll and stuff. So for that request came from the editors of the Wall Street Journal, and that's when they will bring in the design team, and then we'll ask them like, okay, what kind of functionality you want, and then work very closely with them. And they're going to be one of the stakeholders who are going to review and approve the work. Then there's project managers who are just like kind of like aligning all the delivery timelines and everything, so working very closely with them. Sometimes marketing teams have their specific asks or requirements, subscription teams, strategy, and then the leadership team, like the CTO can have a special interest in something, and then you have to work with them. So a lot of being a product designer is just learning to work with these teams. And if there's like one skill you really want to practice and learn early on, it's this skill, that how do you work with these different teams. And when I say like work with them, it involves like, that just means like basically like asking the right questions. What are the right questions you want to ask these teams? And if they have questions for you, like how do you answer them in a way that they understand? And that's another thing I learned, that a lot of these teams are not familiar with the design terminology that we might use. Even like words like wireframes or sitemaps, like they might not necessarily understand that. And so it's like kind of like it's like a learning curve. It's a skill where you can explain your work process and your design solutions to these people in a way that they understand, and they can ask questions in return. um, so that's the number one skill. So if you're doing any kind of internships, or you're planning on doing any kind of internships, or even your first like job experience, you want to make sure that you learn how to work with these teams. But it comes with a challenge, because a lot of these teams usually have when you're working with such like large and diverse teams, um, the challenge is like a lot of them will have like ideas about how the design should be done, or they'll push back on certain solutions, or they'll ask like, why don't you do certain things this way, like why are you doing it this way, why about like why don't you just take out the button from there. And so it's kind of challenging when you're working with them, because a lot of different ideas coming your way. And the way I like navigate that is by working with data, and that's where the research team is very, very important. So in my current role, I don't do the research myself. We have a specific research team, but I work very closely with them. So anytime I have like any kind of design solutions, I'll reach out to someone and be like, hey, like, can you validate these for me? Can you run like a rapid design testing session for it? Or if it's like an initial part of the design process, and if I have enough time, like maybe do some kind of like user interviews to understand like what exactly are we trying to solve here. So if you can get any kind of numbers on your side, that can really help you in those like situations where you're getting pushback from other teams, other stakeholders. It can really help you like kind of support your design solutions. And the other way around too, like if they're pushing for a certain solution, you can ask them like, do you have any data or numbers that support this? And if they don't, then you can propose like doing some kind of testing, and this can really help you figure out like the best way to go forward. And again, it's not about like ego or anything. It's mostly just like you want to make sure you're you know giving the best solution that helps your team make an impact. So numbers are very important, and that's why it's important to work with the research team. And if you don't have a research team, you can always like propose to do like some quick testing. Um, but yeah, so how do you get your, I guess, your foot in the door, especially like when you're in grad school. I remember that time, like when it's because when you're like out there looking at different job listings, even like the entry level jobs, like they'll require some kind of a like an certain level of experience, or and it's kind of frustrating because you're trying to apply, like it's like what comes first, the egg or the chicken, right? Like how do you start? um and I wish there was like a cheat code that I can give, that, oh, if you do these steps, you're getting in easily, or that these are just the steps to follow. And even I honestly don't know the answer myself. I, I'm still trying to figure out like what's the best way to land a job interview or get to that like, the next step in your career, especially given the job market right now. It's not easy. It's absolutely like it's really wild out there right now. But these are just some things that I noticed on my end, like kind of on the other side. So in my team, we're hiring for a principal designer, so someone with like 10 plus years of experience, and someone who's not really a manager, but can like mentor other designers and kind of, provide that like oversight. Um, and it's interesting to because I was asked by my manager to sit in some of those interviews as we were interviewing different candidates. And it's interesting to see the kind of the thought process that happens on the other side. And so these are just some of the things that I've kind of noticed or picked up that I think can really help you navigate, like, get that interview and then perform well in an interview. So the first thing is, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's connections. If you can, it's like about finding someone on the inside who can get you there. And I'm not talking about like some kind of like a referral program. Like I'm sure they work as well or they're somewhat impactful, but I'm talking about someone who can speak for you directly to the hiring manager, and in a way vouch for you or just like let them know that hey, there's this candidate who's a potential candidate with a good experience. And honestly, this is my reaction every time someone says that to me, like you need to network and connect. um, and I remember back in grad school, like I hated hearing this word, but it's really true. Like on the other side, I can see that, they're like my manager who's hiring for this like designer, he is like, oh, we don't have enough candidates, and then someone will be like, oh, I know someone from, I don't know, my grad school time who might be a good candidate. And within like a couple of days that person will get an interview. Like they'll just skip the line, they will have an interview. And it kind of like, even during the interview, that person I feel like has a special like, because they're coming from like they were referred by someone internally, like directly to the hiring manager. So it makes even the interview like process easier for that person. So if you can get that, that it's, going to definitely increase your chances. And I like think back to my first role where that person reached out to me on LinkedIn, even though he was not hiring himself, but he just like referred me to the hiring manager. I think that really helped me get that first role, uh, even though I didn't really have much experience in terms of like, except for that internship experience, I didn't have much experience. Um, at the same time, though, it's not necessarily true. This second role that I have, this was a completely cold application. In this case, I didn't do a lot of the things that they tell you to do. So, for example, they say that, oh, you should tailor your resume for each job application. You should connect with someone for each application. You should have a custom like cover letter, and an updated portfolio. I didn't do any of that for this role that I'm currently working. This was actually the first application that I sent out in that like job like hunting process. And this was just for me to get over my fear. I was like, okay, I just need to send one application just so that I can get over that like fear and hesitancy of like applying for a new job. Um, in fact, like I even put the wrong email address when I was sending that application. So for like a week, the recruiter was trying to reach me on through email and couldn't, and then finally called me. But it worked out. So like what I'm trying to say is like, yes, it works, but sometimes like even cold applications work. So don't like, I don't know, beat yourself up too much about like if you don't have a connection, it's never gonna work. It's just having a connection will definitely help you get a long way to landing a job interview. Um, and then, once you have a connection, it's very important that you are prepared. You have your portfolio ready, you have your resume ready, because it is such a tough job market and because things are moving so fast. You want to make sure that, if someone comes up to you and be like, hey, I can refer you, or hey, if you reach out to someone and they respond like, yeah, sure, like, you want to be ready. You don't want to keep them waiting for like, even like 2 days. Like be ready to get it out of the door as soon as possible. So it's good to be prepared, but you want to make sure that you're not like in this like effort to be prepared. You don't fall into this idea of perfectionism that you have to like, have the best portfolio in the world ever to start applying for jobs. Think of like your portfolio as like an MVP. Like, as product designers, we learn about this concept of like kind of like prioritizing and having an MVP. Some, like the first like launch that you do, it's not going to be the best product in the world. It's not going to have every single feature that you want. But it's going to have like just enough to get it out of the door. I think your portfolio is like that too, where it might not necessarily be everything that you want it to be, but it should be enough for you to just start applying for jobs and just get you out there. Um, because if you wait, I'm one of those people who honestly do this a lot, where I will keep putting off like applying for applications if I'm, looking for a new job, just because I would be like, well, I need to make sure my portfolio is amazing and stellar and spectacular and my resume is like amazing. But, like I think it's a trap because you're not really shooting any shots. And that's the other thing, like because there are just so many candidates applying for jobs right now, you want to make sure you're sending in your application as soon as possible. So timing really is the key. So don't wait or procrastinate your applications because you're trying to build that perfect portfolio. And then speaking of the portfolio, there are like a lot of different tips, but these are just some things that I kind of learned over time from my experience. And again, I guess I should have added this disclaimer in the beginning of this like presentation, but a lot of these things like I'm also like learning how to do right now. Like I'm not saying I do them all the time, but I'm also learning to do them. And I guess like when it comes to portfolios, like these are some of the things. Um, like one thing that I learned very early on was that the format of case studies that, I learned in grad school is not necessarily the best when it comes to applying for jobs. I'm not sure where I read this. Like I don't know if it was an article or maybe it was like a TikTok video or something, or maybe I'm just making this up. But like I think it's like on average, like a recruiter or a hiring manager, they spend like from 7 to 9 seconds, just 7 to 9 seconds looking at your portfolio. So you want to make sure that it's impactful, it's clear, it's concise, it's very short, but it has a lot of impact because they're not going to read through like chunks of text to try and figure out what's going on. They just want to look at like what were you doing? Like what was it? Was it a redesign? Was it like a launch? Like what was that? The project? And they want to see the impact that you made, like, and usually that's like numbers, like how did it impact the subscription rates, or how did it impact the site traffic and stuff like that. So keeping it short and very impactful, that's key to it. Make sure you include the impact or the results in the very beginning of your case study, because that's basically what we're looking for, like when you're trying to understand like uh, someone else's work. The second thing is you want to highlight your contributions. And I mean, like, in a way where when you're talking about the work, you're talking about in even like how you did it. Like, instead of saying me and my team or we, and I know it's easy to do that because even like in grad school, but even outside, like when you start working, a lot of times you'll be working with other designers. So you tend to speak in like, we tend to speak in like terms like we or my team, but in your case study, make sure that you're writing it in like that first person singular, like I did this, I did that. And if there are parts of the design process where you did not like actively do anything in that part of the design process, I'm sure you're still collaborating there. So you want to, phrase it as like, I collaborated with this person and worked on this and contributed this. So again, making sure you're highlighting the work as yours, like as what you did, as I did. So it's very, very, very important because um, as we were interviewing for the one of the candidates in my team, uh, one of the reasons my manager kind of passed over a candidate was because he said that I didn't really get a sense of ownership from that candidate. Like that candidate did not speak about the work as like his work. He spoke about it as like work that he did as part of a team, but he didn't give a sense of ownership of that work. So it's very, very important that you talk about your work as your work. Um, and then get a lot of feedback on your portfolio, on your case studies. You're very lucky that you're in grad school. You have a lot of people around you. You have teachers. You have like peers who can offer you this kind of feedback. So make sure you use that and get that feedback, because a lot of times when you're too focused, and this is true for design work as well, right? Like when you're so focused and just in like just entrenched in your work, it's hard to step back and look at the big picture and see if it's actually working. And that's where like design reviews and critiques are very important, right? Like it's a third person kind of like objective like feedback about your work. So make sure you get that about your portfolio too. Like, what's working, what's not working, and try to get like that honest feedback, from people you are sure will give you that honest feedback. Because I think that definitely helps you to kind of like look at your work in a more holistic way instead of just like you getting just lost in like the nitty gritty details that might not be as important as you think they are. Um, you get a bigger idea of like the big picture. And then once you once you get that, like for example interview, you're in that, you land an interview. So this is like a tip for that. um, my biggest tip for like navigating a job interview, and this is something I learned like when I was interviewing for this like Dow Jones role, is you want to think of that interview as not just like, oh, they're interviewing you and you want to show that you're such a perfect fit, but you want to go into that interview with the idea that you're also interviewing them. You're trying to see if that is the right team for you and that is the right organization for you. And like I know when you're applying for jobs, you almost feel like this sense of desperation, like just anything, like I want to just, at least that's how I was like, I just want to like grab onto like the first thing that comes my way, because it feels almost impossible sometimes, right? But I'll just say this though, that if you end up in a position in a team where it's not the right fit for you, or the work culture is toxic, it can actually be there honestly three outcomes, and none of those outcomes are really good. One is that it will emotionally just really destroy your emotional health, and that is not a good thing, because then that leads to burnout, and you don't want to experience that so early on in your career. Second option is that you end up quitting, and then you're back to square one. You're back into like that job hunting process, and you kind of have to start all over again. And the third option is, which is like I didn't even realize that until I experienced this in my team. So uh, my previous team that I was part of was not a very healthy team dynamic, and it was a very like difficult kind of like team dynamic to work in. And I was talking to my coworkers, and I was wondering, I was like, well, I'm new, like I just started here, so I'm kind of like waiting to, I don't know, kind of like spend some time and then move on to a different opportunity. But my coworkers have been in that position for like 3 to 4 years, and I was like, why are you guys still here? And they mentioned, they were like that their confidence is at such an all-time low because of that like toxic work dynamic, that they don't have that confidence to go out and even look for another job. Like they're not even sure about like applying for a new job, which I thought was like, this is like the worst case scenario at this point. Like you're just stuck in a toxic workplace and you don't even have the confidence to go out and start looking for a new job. And it's very possible for to happen if you're, especially if you're working with someone who's constantly berating your work and just like putting you down. So you really want to make sure when you go into a job interview that you don't end up in a toxic workplace, because in any scenario it's not a good scenario. You're going to like definitely regret it. You're definitely going to think to yourself that maybe you should have just spent maybe 1 more month or 2 more months looking for a new role instead of being in the mess that you're in right now. So yeah, by flip the script, I mean that like when you go in for an interview and they ask you like, oh, what are some of the challenges that you have navigated in the past? I mean, you answer that question, but then you ask them, you're like, oh, when it's your turn to ask questions, like, what are some of the challenges that your team has navigated in the past? And it's like when they ask you, like, oh, what are your, strengths and weaknesses? Um, when it's your turn, you can ask, like, oh, what is your team's strength and what are some of like your weaknesses or areas of improvement? And it also helps you get like, the biggest benefit in my opinion is that it helps you realize like if that's the right team for you. But also it helps you, it's like a mindset shift, you know, you're not going in with like, oh, trying to prove your worth or something, like trying to prove to them like, oh, please like pick me or whatever. But you're going in with like why should I work for you? Like why should, you know, like I pick you as my workplace? And I don't know, it just makes you feel more confident as a person going in. And it shows to them as well that, you know, you're not just randomly like sending out like applications everywhere. I mean, even if you are, but it's fine. But it shows like a sense of like intentionality on your end, that, you know, you're like intentional about where you want to work. You know what you're looking for. And that's a definitely like a plus sign. Like you don't want to come across as like, you know, again, like you're just like desperately sending out applications left and right. But the fact that you're more intentional and um, you know what you're looking for. So that's kind of like one of the biggest things that really helped me in the interview process. And then this is another thing that I learned recently from my manager. Again, because of from the hiring process and being part of it. Um, we had like 6 or 7 candidates apply for the job, and on paper, almost all of them were like perfect. They had all the right experiences. They had all the like credentials, the best portfolios, everything. But once, you know, you start talking and to them, and then you realize that, you know, those people are just not like uh, people you'd want to work with. And that's where who you are as a person and as a human being is very, very important. And it's something my manager said that when he was explaining, because he was talking about like he interviewed a candidate. Again, the candidate, they seemed perfect, but after the interview, my manager was like, yeah, I don't think so, we're going to pass this person. And my manager, he said this one thing that, you know, you can teach someone how to use a design system, for example. You can teach someone how to use a certain tool, but you cannot teach someone how to be like a good person or a good human being. And so you want to make sure that, you know, when you're going in as, you know, you're showing like your human side, and you know, you're showing that you're you know, a good person to work with, which I'm sure all of you are. um, and some of the things that, you know, my manager and even I, that I look for whenever I'm talking to different candidates is like that person, first of all, that person is excited about the work that they do. And that just shows that they're confident in their work, but also that they're excited. They're curious, which means that they are a good listener. You want to make sure that you're not someone who's, you know, just constantly just talking about themselves. You need to come across as someone who is, you know, a good listener, someone who's curious about the company, the team, and someone who seems open to communication. Um, and again, it's a balance of being confident and excited about your work, and at the same time being curious about the role, the company, the team, and someone who listens to other people. So you might not necessarily have all the skills or all the experience, but if you come across as a person who is personable and approachable, it makes a big difference in the interview. And honestly, up to now, this is the biggest problem that we keep running into when we're trying to hire someone, is that we it, we want to make sure that, you know, we because this role specifically, it's someone who has like mentorship skills, someone who can give feedback to people in a way that is constructive. So it's again very important to work on the communication skills. And then speaking of like trending like topics in the industry, and also I should like keep track of time. Oh, AI is, I know it's like something that keeps coming up. But I'll just say this, that AI is, I mean, it's here to stay, and at this point we need to like think of like what what value it brings to us. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're not viewing AI as a tool that you can ask to do things for you, but AI is more like, at this point, at least at my workplace, we think of it as more like a coworker, someone you can like bounce ideas of, someone you can brainstorm with, someone who you can like even ask for like suggestions and ideas, and offer your suggestions and get their feedback on those, like how you would talk to a coworker about different like design solutions or ideas. That's what AI is at this point. So don't think of it as a tool that you just ask to do things for you, but at this point it's more like someone, honestly, think of it as like a virtual coworker who can like listen to your ideas and provide you feedback, or potentially like help you brainstorm. um, Next is that the very definition of roles is changing. So like I mentioned, that my company went through a restructure, like team restructuring um, phase, where they changed roles. But it's happening. I've noticed that this is happening overall, where product design is not just about design anymore, but it involves so much more like strategy, and making sure you're part of like the initial like even before you kick off the design process, learning to understand scope, learning to prioritize things, kind of like in the product strategy, being part of that process is very important. And I think this is also where people who claim like, well, AI is going to come over and take over all the jobs, because now you have AI tools that can literally build wireframes for you within minutes and seconds. Um, but the strategy and the creative thinking that you provide are still very important. So it's very important that you start like honing in on that, and because, like I said, the job roles themselves are changing now to kind of reflect that. Um, and then kind of like the design process where you iterate, repeat, like learn. Um, you kind of have to start applying that to the in order for you to be successful with the changing landscapes and everything. um, that is going to be something that's going to help you a lot, where even as you're applying for jobs, but even once you get a job and you're in your career, learning and iterating from your experiences is very important to help you understand where you want to go next. um, because as the job descriptions are changing, it's going to require for you to learn new skills, learn different methodologies, and iterate on them in a way that fits your need or your situation best. So constant, don't like be, and I think as UX designers or product designers, it's kind of something that we already know. But again, just a reminder that it's important to keep like learning and iterating your process itself, and kind of what you're implementing in your career, but also in your job search and everything. Yeah, that's it on my end.
Thank you for that very detailed talk. That was really insightful. We're open to questions. There were some questions that came in, like when we were getting the feedback, when we were getting registrations. But honestly, looking at them, you've touched upon all these topics already. So if anybody on the call has anything specific to ask, you can add that in the chat. But yeah, if not, I'll just go through this list again. Yeah, I think we have one that like touches upon something that you already did mention. You did mention about like using AI and like be comfortable using it in your day-to-day tasks. But
Mhm.
is would you say that does that specifically like how does it work within your work style, and like how does it shape the perspective within the media and the news domain?
Yeah. So for we just recently got the green light to use like Gen AI at our workplace. Before that, we were not like allowed to use, because of privacy and legal issues. Like we were not, you know, uh, we didn't have the green light to use the AI stuff. So and even now we only have like the for certain specific things. And since we use like the Google, uh, like softwares, the Google tools. So we have Gemini now and Notebook LM. It's only been like a couple of weeks actually, but already I can see that there's a big shift. It's, I mean, number one thing for sure is taking out like the manual labor on one side, right? If instead of like going through like a 20-page, 30-page requirements document, it's much more easier now to just upload it and ask for like, okay, what are, just summarize it for you, list the requirements, list the KPIs, the goals that we're trying to hit. Um, but I really like the part about the brainstorming where you can ask, like, based on a product requirement document, um, what are some of the strategies we can use to address these design solutions? What are some of the potential roadblocks? Like these, asking these kind of questions. What would a tentative timeline look like? Or you can offer like, hey, this is a timeline we're hoping for. Does it make sense based on the information in the PRD? So it's like these kind of like planning and like strategy kind of documents, right? Questions that AI can help with. We're still not using anything like AI for, like, for example, like Figma AI or any of those like wireframing AIs. Even if we were to use it, I still think that there is still, like a human kind of like touch point that is needed there, right? Like someone needs to review and approve those. Those are just going to give you like a starting point, but you still need to go in with your own like creative thinking to go in and uh, like make sure that the solutions make sense. Um, so yeah, for now it's just summarizing reports or compiling reports, like understanding data. Notebook LM and Gemini are like the two tools that I use the most right now at work, where just like those kind of like everyday manual tasks are more streamlined. So, and then in terms of news, I think it's very interesting, and that's like a question that we're constantly like trying to understand ourselves. Um, there's kind of like tension about that as well, right? Because what does the future of, like, I don't know, journalism look like? I'm not a part of that because I don't really like, I'm not part of like the that, I guess, workflow or process. Um, but it's interesting because, a lot of the solutions that we're starting to propose are revolving around AI now. So using AI chats for different, parts of our solutions. For example, I think WSJ offers like an AI summary at the top of the articles. So how do we as designers make sure that we're incorporating these AI solutions while also kind of like addressing the ethical questions around it, right? So making sure that we're pointing out that this is an AI summary. How do we do that as designers in a way that it's not intrusive, but it also lets users know what's touched by AI and what's coming from the reporters. And it's not, this is just like one example of like AI summary. It's kind of like Google summaries, but there are other, uh, things that we're working on that involve AI. And so how do we start incorporate that as designers into our solutions, and what is like an ethical way to go about it? But yeah.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting to hear because every domain uses AI in different capacity. So that's really nice to know. Michaela had a question on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So she's asking what kind of product design projects do you typically work on, and like what do you like love and dislike about your role and your job in general?
Um, so I work on the consumer side. So Dow Jones owns a lot of consumer products and then business products. They have two separate teams for that. I'm part of their consumer products, so, and that includes their like financial news publications. That includes the Wall Street Journal and Barron's and MarketWatch. These are three of their like news sites where they offer uh, financial news. Um, so it really varies. I can talk about like some of the projects that I worked on until now. So for the Wall Street Journal, I worked on their live coverage work for the presidential elections. So like figuring out a solution to announce like race results in a way where, because they're going to happen very very fast, right? Like once the results start coming in for the different election races, so announcing in a way where it's very clear right away, like who's the winner, who's who's winning what race, but also like in a way where it's technically feasible. So there are like not a lot of technical issues that can happen. We can't propose a solution where it's going to take a like I said, a heavy lift from the engineering side, um, and in a way where it's easier to read. So that was like a kind of like a the live coverage feed that I worked on for the elections, um, and then there are a couple of like dashboard softwares that we're working on where people can like keep track of like different stocks and stuff. So as the markets change throughout the day, that involves like a lot of charts, a lot of like data. So working with like data visualization, like how do we make sure that it's a good experience but also accessible. So there's that. I'm trying to think of what else. Recently, I worked on like revamping the main navigation, the global navigation for Barron's, and that involved like working with data. So I partnered with a research team to get the site traffic insight on like for like the last 6 months to see how people are interacting with the main navigation, and then based on that like proposing a design solution which is like cleaner, less clunky. So it really depends, honestly, like what kind of project you're assigned to. It can really vary, but they're all within like that financial, like a finance setting. Some of them are like more towards like news, and that's when I work with the editorial team, and some of them are more like tools like dashboards where people can like monitor stuff and keep track of their stocks and everything. And oh, what I like about it, I think I like that there's like a variety of different things happening. So I can always request to be put on a certain type of project. If something like looks very interesting, I can ask for. Or if I'm not really like vibing with something, like if I'm like, oh, I don't, this is not something I'm enjoying, I can request for a different kind of a project to be assigned to. I also like that I work with a research team a lot. So even though I don't like do the research, like I don't own it, I get to collaborate with them a lot, so I can propose, like help them draft like research plans, and then sit on the research like panels, like watch, like observe candidates, not candidate participants, and then kind of like work with the data, and which is like a big plus for me because not a lot of work, like not a lot of companies have that like uh, fleshed out like research team. So I really enjoy, uh, having that research aspect as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that was really helpful. Yeah, we don't have any other questions. I think we can end it with one last question that I have personally for you. Uh,
Mhm.
is like in your experience, like what do you think, like how important is like having a specific domain experience when you're applying to jobs? Does that like play a big role in moving forward or within your applications? Because as grad students, we have like a handful of projects that we worked on and like a couple of internships. But if you're like applying to jobs where you don't really have the similar domain project in your portfolio or something in the same experience like field, does that matter? And yeah, like your thoughts on that.
I I'm honestly not sure. I think from my experience, and this is just like from my experience, I think for an entry level job, it's kind of understood that you're not going to have like a specific experience. And personally, my theory is that I don't want to pigeonhole myself into a certain domain. So, for example, the first job that I got at IPG Health, my job was mostly designing websites for pharma brands. So it was like in the pharma like industry, very very niche, very specific with its own like set of like legal requirements and everything. And then, but I didn't really have any pharma experience beforehand. And then this one is in more in finance world, and again I have zero finance experience. I didn't even know the difference between like stocks and ETFs until I started working here. So I didn't really have much domain knowledge. But I do think that it might help you, get uh, maybe a little bit, like, get you that benefit. But honestly, like, other things will outweigh that, especially in an entry level role. Like maybe if you were like a manager, like, or if you're like applying for that, like even for the principal designer role, like we're not really looking to hire someone from the finance world. We're open to like people from different backgrounds. And for my manager, that was a big plus, that people are coming from, like, say for example, like a sports news background or something else, because it shows that they have like a larger skill set to work with. So I don't think it would matter if you can show your design process and talk about it confidently. I think it shouldn't really matter. And at the entry level, again, I don't think so. You'd want to like kind of box where you just focus in one domain. I personally want to, like, I was thinking like, okay, now I've got experience working in finance, like in the finance world, like now I want to go more in like kind of like a tech kind of a setting where it's like more, you know, tech focused. I don't know how to explain it, which I don't think I've done that until now. But yeah, that's just my personal um, theory or kind of idea.
No, yeah, that helps because that's one of the things like it's always like when you're like picking projects and picking concepts that you want to work in, we're like constantly thinking where we want to work, and it's like getting harder and harder to be picky about the field you want to work in. So yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. Unless anybody else has anything to add on, I think. This was really insightful. Thank you for your time and also a lot of guidance that will help all of us moving
Yeah, of
forward.
course. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have um, anything you'd like to ask, like, I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
Surely. Pujin says he liked all your GIFs. So all that was what it was it was really engaging.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Thank
thank you. Thank you everybody for being here today. Yes.